Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we are diving headfirst into an epic, honestly almost unbelievable rags to riches story from modern history. It is the ultimate David versus Goliath business narrative. We're talking about a totally unknown underdog going toe-to-toe with a massive, ruthless corporate giant, and he's armed with literally nothing but sharp observation and an absolutely insane tolerance for risk. This is the story of the ascent of Sam Zimmerman, a man who would eventually become known across the globe as the Banana King. Right off the bat, I really want you to keep this one staggering question in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. How exactly does a 14-year-old boy, an immigrant arriving entirely alone, manage to take actual garbage, literal discarded waste that major corporations were just throwing away, and spin that into a billion-dollar global empire? It's an absolute masterclass in finding invisible value. But to truly understand how he pulled this off, we have to start at the very beginning of his journey. So let's set the baseline here. Born in 1877 in a tiny, impoverished farming village in western Russia, Sam's life was a struggle for survival from literally day one. At just 10 years old, his father passes away, which plunges his family into even deeper poverty. Realizing that scraping by with simple farm work just wasn't going to save them, Sam makes a monumental decision. At 14, he leaves his mother and his homeland behind. They pulled together whatever pennies the family had for a one-way ticket to America. After a brutal 15-day journey across the ocean, he arrives in this chaotic new world. No money, no connections, doesn't speak a single word of English. His only lifeline is a crumpled scrap of paper with a distant uncle's address. Now, just to survive, Sam immediately started hustling, taking on odd jobs, cleaning floors, working as a helper in warehouses, doing door-to-door deliveries. But here's the thing. Sam had a hidden superpower. He was incredibly observant. He wasn't just sweeping floors. He was intensely watching how businesses actually operated. He listened in on every conversation, studied what customers needed, and watched exactly how suppliers negotiated. For Sam, every single interaction was a business lesson. He was basically a sponge, observing everything about how the American market functioned, carefully saving every single penny he earned, just waiting for the absolute right opportunity to strike. And that brings us to the year 1893. Sam has been in America for 2 years now, so he's 16 years old. While walking down a busy street in Alabama, he spots something at a fruit stall that he had never, ever seen before, a banana. Now, you have to remember, at the end of the 19th century, bananas were highly exotic fruits. Sam is instantly fascinated. He starts asking the vendor endless questions. But he quickly realizes that to truly understand the flow of the money here, he needs to go straight to the source. So he hops on a train, travels 230 kilometers down to the bustling port of Mobile, Alabama, where these massive ships are unloading fruit from Central America. What he sees at those docks completely blows his mind. The massive United Fruit Company, the absolute giant that completely dominated the market, was sorting their unloaded bananas into piles. The premium green bananas? Those were loaded directly onto trains to be shipped nationally at a very high value. The yellow bananas were sold locally. But then there was a third pile, the spotted, ripe bananas. Because these wouldn't survive a long, slow train journey across the country, the United Fruit Company considered them pure waste. Roughly 15% of their entire inventory was just thrown away, literally tossed. Where this massive corporation saw garbage, Sam saw an untouched gold mine. So, what does Sam do next? This is the crucial pivot. He walks right up to the United Fruit Company employees and offers to buy that massive pile of rejected spotted bananas. The price? His entire life savings. $50. Now, that might not sound like a huge deal today, but adjusted for inflation, we are talking about roughly $5,340. A 16-year-old kid with broken English was betting every single cent he had ever made sweeping floors on a pile of rotting fruit that literally nobody else wanted. And the corporate guys, well, they happily took his cash, totally assuming he was a fool. But Sam had a major problem. He was quite literally running a race against time. He loaded his massive haul of ripe bananas onto a train, but as we know, real life doesn't always go according to plan. The trains back then were agonizingly slow. They stopped constantly for track clearances, driver changes, just endless loading delays. As the train sat idle for hours on end, Sam is watching his entire life savings change color and rot right in front of his eyes. If he waited until that train reached its final destination, his product was going to be worthless mush. In a moment of pure desperation, Sam pulls off an absolute masterstroke. Let's break down his brilliant telegraph pivot. Step 1. At the very next stop, he jumps off the train and sprints over to the Western Union telegraph operator. He essentially hacks his own distribution problem by having the operator send messages ahead to every grocer and street vendor at the upcoming stations. Step 2, the message offers them a fantastic deal on sheep bananas, plus a commission for anyone who helps sell them quickly. Step 3, when Sam's train finally pulls into the next station, boom, there is a ready-made crowd of hungry buyers waiting for him right on the platform. Let's actually run the numbers on this incredibly resourceful first trip. Sam's initial investment was that massive, highly risky $50. By stopping at every single station and aggressively selling off the ripening fruit to these eager crowds, he walked away with $190 in ending cash. After accounting for all his operational costs and travel expenses along the way, he cleared a cool $50 in pure total profit. He basically doubled his money. He hadn't just made it all back, he had definitively proven that his totally crazy business model actually worked. He found a gap in the market that no one else cared about, and he turned it into cold, hard cash. And you know, Sam didn't just pat himself on the back, take his $50, and stop. No way. He immediately took that money and scaled his hustle incredibly aggressively. That first run was a huge success, but over the following weeks, he did it faster, he bought bigger loads, and he became incredibly efficient at knowing exactly who to sell to and where. He essentially systematized the entire hustle. By the time 1903 rolled around, this former floor sweeper wasn't just some local trader anymore. He was moving millions in volume, just flooding the market with highly affordable fruit. But as you can probably guess, this level of success paints a massive target right on your back. The giant strikes back. Sam was no longer just an invisible kid buying up their scraps. By overflowing the market with cheap bananas, he was actually starting to undercut the United Fruit Company's premium market demand. He had become the biggest buyer at the Alabama port, dealing in massive bulk and paying purely in cash. The corporate giant finally woke up and realized that the kid they used to sell their garbage to was now eating directly into their bottom line, and they decided it was time to squeeze him out of the game for good. The United Fruit Company unleashed a wave of ruthless corporate sabotage, systematically targeting his entire operation. They artificially delayed his shipments just to let his fruit rot on the docks. When he ordered a specific amount, they would purposely only supply half of his demand to starve out his distribution network. And in a truly lethal move, they began dumping their own cheap crates onto the market at below-cost prices, specifically to kill Sam's profit margins. Sam quickly realized that as long as he relied on his biggest competitor for his supply, he would always be at their mercy. He needed total control. Which brings us to the ultimate jungle gamble. Sam realizes he can't just be a middleman anymore. If he wants to survive, he has to become an importer and a producer himself. To pull this off, he partners up with an investor named Ashbel Hubbard, a guy who really believed in Sam's relentless talent. Together, they form the Cuyamel Fruit Company. They buy their own shipping fleet, and they purchase over 100 acres of fertile land. Sam is pivoting from selling portside scraps to growing his own crops directly. And this leads to, honestly, one of the most shocking twists in this entire story. Sam and his partner hold 90% of the new company, but the United Fruit Company, his massive, ruthless, sabotaging competitor, actually invests to take a 10% stake in his new venture. Why on earth would they do that? Well, they saw his raw potential and wanted a piece of the action. And for Sam, it provided the heavy, upfront cash investment he desperately needed to launch his ships and buy his land. It was absolutely a deal with the devil, but Sam took it because he had to survive. So what does Sam do next? He takes the boldest step of his entire life. Instead of managing things comfortably from the safe, modernized American ports like all those executives at United Fruit did, Sam relocates directly into the unforgiving Central American jungles. He knew that to truly control the supply chain, he had to deeply understand the ground reality. He had to know the soil, he had to know the rivers, and the people. He leaves everything behind to go live amid sweltering heat, dangerous wildlife, and the constant, deadly threat of malaria. And Sam didn't just sit in some cushy jungle office either. He personally met with government officials and, utilizing some, let's call them strategic investments, essentially bribing local power brokers, he secured incredibly cheap prime land. But far more importantly, he worked the fields right alongside his hired laborers. He was out there clearing trails and planting seeds, which earned him their deep, lasting respect. He even built entire villages and settlements right in the middle of the jungle to support his workers. His practical, boots-on-the-ground knowledge vastly outshined his corporate competitors, who literally only ever read paper reports from a desk. Because of his deep jungle network, Sam's quality and pricing were now matching the United Fruit Company blow for blow. He knew he had the momentum,
and he wanted to secretly buy up massive amounts of new land before the giant caught on. But this led to a massive internal clash of ambitions with his partner back in the US. His partner looked at their heavy debts, the constant risks of floods and pests, and just wanted caution. He wanted to play it safe and pay off their existing debts before expanding. It was the classic showdown, the visionary entrepreneur versus the cautious accountant.
Sam was absolutely convinced that this was his moment, so he takes his most dangerous gamble yet. To buy out his conservative partner's shares, Sam needed a massive amount of capital. But the traditional banks, they flat out refused to lend to him because the banana business was considered way too risky. So Sam turned to the underworld. He took out massive, highly dangerous loans at a brutal, crushing 50% interest rate. 50%! He was betting absolutely everything he had, and honestly, money he didn't even have, entirely on himself. By taking on that insane underworld debt, Sam successfully bought out his partner, taking full 90% ownership of the company, leaving only that original 10% with United Fruit. The decision-making power was now 100% in his hands. It was the ultimate all-or-nothing bet. Either he was going to build an unstoppable empire from the ground up, or he would be completely crushed beneath the weight of his own massive ambition. But as you can guess, his relentless drive prevailed, cementing him as the undisputed Banana King.
But wait, this is where the story completely shifts gears. Sam Zamuri had conquered the corporate world, sure, but as his empire grew, business stopped being just about business. The path he was on would lead him to a place he never, ever imagined. So I'm going to leave you with this final, highly provocative thought. How exactly does a fruit salesman from a tiny Russian village go from selling spotted bananas on a slow train to manipulating geopolitics, funding coups, and literally overthrowing foreign governments and dictatorships? That is a wild reality we are going to have to unpack next time.